The Capitals fall to the Habs, but it wasn't all bad news.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. I would love to talk Capitals hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for more details. In today's episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Caps as they drop another game, this time to the Habs, but it wasn't all bad news. We'll talk about that in the show. A little bit later, we will talk about the issues with special teams and how that's ultimately leading to the Capitals' issues. A little bit later, we will talk about how Alex Ovechkin and Dylan Strome are just knocking it out of the park. But to get it going here, we will talk about the Caps falling to the Habs in another game. And, when you see a loss associated with a game, you assume that it was all negative. And I guess it wasn't a loss by definition. They made it to overtime, but so they did pick up a point, but they didn't get a win. I'll put it to you that way. And I was a bit bummed out. And watching the game, how the game started, I thought that they were going to lose by a much larger margin. And again, if you're an everydayer, I talk about Darcy Kemper all the time, but Darcy Kemper kept the Capitals in this game and just really stood on his head and kept him in it. That's what it was about. And the big thing for me in this game is the Capitals were applying a lot of pressure. In previous games, they weren't getting a lot of shots on goal. In this particular game, the Caps had 33, the Habs 28. Penalties is what cost the Capitals, in my opinion, or at least a good portion of the blame goes on that. 6 penalties, the Habs 5, and penalty minutes, Caps 12, Habs 10. But the positivity from this is one of the things that was spoke of is that Alex Ovechkin in the previous 2 games didn't have any shots on goal. And I'll talk a little bit more about Ovi in depth a little bit later, but he was able to get some good production out there as he had 5 shots on goal. Dylan Strome, 5 shots on goal, and Nicholas Backstrom with 5 shots on goal as well. So it wasn't for a lack of trying. I just think that to a certain extent, they made the shots and they don't all find the back of the net. And that was the case here as well. Another player that really popped off the page for me, and it's going to sound a bit surprising, was Anthony Mantha. At least in the first part of the game, I thought he played really well. He was generating opportunities. He had 2 shots on goal, but was limited to 10:02 of ice time. So, steps in the right direction. And if you follow me on YouTube, I posted a video after I said that, they didn't win the game, but it was baby steps in the right direction. And what was I talking about is it was a bad start to the game. We all know that, right? But towards the end, I think that the Capitals were starting to find their way. Things were starting to flow. Strome was playing a big game. Again, that's what I meant when I said it wasn't all negativity. And sometimes that's what it is about, is finding the positivity. So the Capitals rallied and they came back, tied the game. But Cole Caulfield had other plans. He ended things early in a 3-on-3 extra frame as Washington fell 3-2. Washington drops to 1-2-1 to open the 23-24 season. So, as a Capitals fan, I know I watch these games with Capitals colored glasses on, but this season rather, is going just the way that a lot of the NHL critics said it was going to go. And I know that this is really early in the season. I have a belief that they will turn it around, of course, because it is so early in the season, but not an optimal situation, and we're hoping for bigger things as the Caps take on the Maple Leafs this week. The team generated offense opportunities, 32 shots on goal by the end of the night, in addition to having 5 power play opportunities. So, again, they had the opportunities. It's about capitalizing on those opportunities. I think that maybe Spencer Carberry might need to take a look into the power play a little bit more and see if there's something that he would change about it. Caulfield's wrister, after a tough line change for Washington, led to the OT loss at the Bell Center. And if there's one place that I've circled that I would like to go see a Capitals game, it is Bell Center. Everything that I've heard, and Montreal's a beautiful city from everything that I hear, that's where I would like to go, and just a really great place to play a game, to watch a game by all accounts that I've heard. So if you haven't been there, I would circle that, as I hear it is quite stunning. It was also the first time the team managed more than 30 shots, as it managed 32. And that's the half the battle right there. And that's what I was talking about earlier in this segment, is baby steps in the right direction. What do we know about the previous games is they were held to virtually little to no shots on goal through a lot of the periods of the game in the previous games there. So to have 32, again, right in the right direction. Now, if some of those can find the back of the net, they're going to have to screen the opponent's goalie a little bit more, get a little bit tricky. And I know as we watch these games at home on television, it's easy to say, well, they should do this different or they should do that different. If you talk to the players, they go, it's not as easy when you're on the ice trying to play against these guys. The Capitals have also gave up the first goal of the game in all of their games this season. And that is what, gave me that sinking feeling in my stomach. Here we go again. They're going to lose this one. And Darcy Kuemper had the look on his face like, dang it. I'm not going to use a 4-letter word on the show, but you could tell that he was upset because he kind of knows how this has gone this season. If they give up the first goal, oftentimes they lose the game. So I think that he was frustrated, but the Capitals did find a way to rally and stage a comeback thanks to Strome. So Koozie was on the ice for both of the Habs goals. And Koozie had kind of a mixed bag game. Like I said, he was on the ice for both the goals, so he was a bit of a liability. He did have a good shorthanded chance in the third, though, and ultimately gave up the game-tying assist. And ultimately the game-tying assist. So he was getting positive contributions, but he was also a bit of a liability as being on the ice for the Habs goals. All things considered, I think that Koozie is showing, bits and pieces of improvement. It's too early in the season for me to, give you a really great idea of where I think this season is going to go for Koozie. But again, I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer on this podcast. I know there's a lot of podcasts that would just rail the Capitals. I wouldn't want to listen to that as a podcast listener. And I'm going to try and not do that as often as possible. I'm not going to candy coat things either. I'm trying to be, look at the situation honestly, but I don't want a podcast that day in and day out, the Capitals are awful. That would just be a really horrible thing to listen to. But Nicholas Backstrom was 57.14 in the faceoff circle. The Caps finished the game with 13 giveaways compared to Montreal's 14. So it's the little thing, cleaning up the little things that is going to lead to their success. Another special moment for the Capitals was Hardy Hamann Octel appeared in his first NHL game, and he had the tradition of making the first lap out there at Bell Center. As you heard about, Alan May was talking about that has always been just one of the greatest places to play as an NHLer. He said that when he played, everyone dressed to the top of their potential, wearing the best clothes possible, that there was just something about playing Montreal at the Bell Center that's always been really special. Like I said, Darcy Kuemper had a great game. He saved 25 of 28. That's good for a .893 save percentage. And then, another thing that's concerning for me is no Nick Dowd. We know that he had that core procedure done in the offseason. What is behind him missing all this time? I think that Protas and Malenstein and that they have done a good job filling in the gaps there. But, ultimately it would be good if we could have Nick Dowd out there, because I think this team plays that much better. But if you take a look, it was Malenstein, Protas, and Mantha. And Mantha, again, it's funny to say, being that, everyone's kind of railed on him as being just this horrible player. I think he's shown steps of improvement. Am I going to say that he's turned things around? I'm not going to say that, but I'm taking the arrows. I'm taking the applause as well. So if we take a look at the lines there, it was Ovechkin, Strome, and Phillips. I like that. That was very productive. And again, in the next segment here, I will talk about Ovechkin and Strome. Then second line, McMichael, Koozie, Oshie. Third line, Milano, Backstrom, Wilson. And the fourth line, Malenstein, Protas, and Mantha. Pretty good. I think that Tom Wilson kind of had a look on his face like, what's going on? Why have I been relegated to playing the third line? Then we take a look at the deep pairing, Sandin, Carlson, Faravari, Jensen, and Haman, Octel, TVR. I liked it. I thought it was a good lines out there. I think the deep pairings were good. I would like to see a little bit more of that. One thing I would like to see at some point this season is to see McMichael on the top line at the center position, even though everything I've heard thus far is that he is warming to the wing position. Talking about Capitals prospects having a great night as well. After another 3-point night last night, Andrew Cristall now has 25 points in 11 games since returning to Kelowna. Skating looks improved as well. So, another great prospect in the Capitals pool in years to come. That is positivity. That is what we're looking for as we, I don't know how far out he's going to be. I would say a couple of years anyway, but positivity abounds for this team. They just need to clean some things up. And I think that ultimately, they'll be in a good position. It's just fixing the small things, and I think they'll at least be better than they were last night. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about Alex Ovechkin and Strome and the great evening that they had. We'll talk about that coming up. Alex Ovechkin scores a hat trick. The Capitals win the Stanley Cup. And if you want to win 100 times your money, play daily fantasy hockey on the Sleeper app. These are all possible scenarios for this season, but to have a chance at winning big, you need to play daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. As the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network, Sleeper is our top choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And let's face it, this cap season has not gone according to script. If you got a little bit of money on it and like to play fantasy hockey, that is why you need Sleeper. With stud players like Ovechkin and Wilson, all you need to do is pick more or less on stats for these stars. Choose stats like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more. You heard me, Capitals fans, 100 times payouts on Sleeper. So start paying attention and get your picks right so you could win big. Use promo code Locked On NHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for more details. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to talk about the great evening for Alex Ovechkin and Strome out there as they just killed it out there. We know that Strome had 2 goals, and we know that Alex Ovechkin did not get a goal, but he was a man on a mission. And I think the chatter was getting back to him that, he had gone 2 games without a shot on goal. At the end of the day, I think that he takes pride. I know he takes pride in the product that he puts out on the ice. So I knew that he was going to bring it to big time. But just taking a look at the stats in particular for Alex Ovechkin, like I said, 5 shots on goal, an assist, and Dylan Strome, 2 goals and 5 shots on net. So great production. Again, I want to see more of that. I liked Ovechkin, Strome, and Phillips. Phillips, who had a great evening as well. A pleasant surprise, a guy that flew under the radar. I want to see more Ovi, Strome, and Phillips and see how they go from there. Again, I like Wilson on the top line, but I think that, they are not getting the results that they're looking for. Spencer Carberry and his assistants are taking that snow globe up and shaking it up and trying to get this team on track. And I think they're headed in the right direction. It's almost like someone trying to unlock a padlock and nope, that didn't open it. How about that? Nope. Once they unlock it, it's going to be fine. And I think that this team will start to progress. When is that going to be? Is it going to be the next game or the following game? I'm not a fortune teller, but I'd like to think that they are headed in the right direction. And I think it's going to be good. Ovi made good on his word to lead by example and had 5 shots on goal. Ovi set up Strome to help in the attempted comeback. Dylan Strome would help secure a point, but it wasn't enough to get the win. And he did all they could do. And it was just so good to see, positivity and smiles all over the Capitals players on the bench and out on the ice when Strome's scored both of those goals, especially the game tying goal. That was a big moment and a morale boost. I think that to a certain extent, the biggest problem that the Capitals face right now is they are caught up in their own heads, kind of similar to Anthony Mantha and a lot of other, athletes and players out there, that if you don't have the success that you're looking for, you kind of start to project failure. You start to see failures before they happen. I think I saw that a little bit on Darcy Kemper's face when that first goal was scored, that he's like, we're going to lose this again. And it was just one goal, but it's funny how your mind can play tricks and you start to almost project failure. I think that that was the case. Strome would find the back of the net in the final 2 minutes with help from Evgeny Kuznetsov. That's what I was talking about. So Kuznetsov, a liability, but also a great addition on this team as well. If he could just fine tune that a little bit more, I think that would be good. But talking about Phillips, and the pleasant surprise, again, if you were not a guy that's just a super NHL nerd, there's a pretty good chance that you didn't know who Matthew Phillips was before he landed on the Capitals, or I should say perhaps an AHL nerd, a hockey nerd, suffices to say. Matthew Phillips picked up his second assist of the season and now leads Washington with 3 points in 4 games to open the 23-24 season. His 3 points have come in his last 3 games. Again, good productivity. I want to see more of him on the top line. I think that he has earned it. So just really great things. But talking about another guy that potentially could, get his opportunity sooner than later, I really do believe it. I've been banging the drum on him all off season, is I think that Ivan Miroshnichenko is going to get his opportunity as he scored his first AHL goal in the last game. One of the things I noticed there as well is that his English is coming along really well. So positivity for all the Capitals organizations, from these young guys like Matthew Phillips that, don't have a ton of NHL experience, an undersized guy. You got to think that Matthew Phillips has a chip on his shoulder, because what is one of the first things that everyone mentions when they talk about Matthew Phillips is his size. If I was Matthew Phillips, I would hate that, it's like a handshake, like, hi, you're the small guy on the team. It's like, do I have an identity other being the small guy on the team? Let my resume speak for me. Let the stat sheet, let the back of my hockey card speak for itself. At the end of the season, it is going to be interesting to see how Matthew Phillips finishes. The big thing for him, just based on his size, I'm going to say it because I have to, is staying, not getting injured, because he is a smaller guy. And I saw him get hit pretty hard a couple times out there the other night there. So if he can kind of, stay out of harm's way as much as possible, I know that's difficult, but, so those open ice hits, got to keep your head up. You don't want to be working the puck in the corner too much if you don't have to, because you are a target. Someone like Tom Wilson or a Reeves or Maroon, they're going to target you. And of course, it wouldn't be Wilson. I'm just talking about the stature size. A player of that stature is going to try to take you out just because they're bigger and you're smaller. And that's ultimately how hockey works, is you're trying to gain an advantage. So all things considered, I love Ovechkin, Strome, and Phillips. I want to see more of that. With that said, at some point during the season, I would really like to see McMichael on that top line at the center position, give him a nice long look. But in the regard of Strome at center, I would say that give that some more time, see how that works. And if that does not work, then try McMichael up there. But all things considered, I think it was a really great game for the Capitals towards the end. There's what I'm going to say. And you're going to say, Dan, they lost another game. I get that. I'm talking about towards the end. I think that things were finally starting to come together. And that's what you have to do, building blocks. And hopefully, if you have enough great blocks in place, you can build a castle. Let's hope for that for the Caps. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about how the special teams has been a liability for the Capitals. And what can they do to change that? We'll talk about that straight ahead. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you need. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you'll need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, one of the things that I think is important when you watch these games, whether it's a win or it's a loss, is determining what is causing that outcome. If it was a win, what led to that? If it was a loss, what led to that? It's easy to just sweep things under the rug and say, well, they'll figure it out in the next game. Not the case. And there's been big issues with special teams with the Caps, and some of them have been good, but I would say overwhelmingly have been negative. And what do they need to do to clean that up? And I think that ultimately that would help lead to their success. Five Capitals were called for penalties: Ovi, Hardy Hamanaktel, Sonny Milano, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and Tom Wilson. And some of those are avoidable, some of those are unavoidable. I'm going to say one of the things that I hate to hear from people, but the officiating in that game against the Habs was horrible. Ticky-tacky goals, or excuse me, penalties the entire game. And some of those even went up for Montreal as well. And, again, when your team's not playing well, one of the things I hate to hear is you start blaming the officiating. But for me, watching the game, that was a glaring thing. Now, I'm not here to say that none of those penalties that were against the Capitals were deserving, or they weren't deserving. I'm going to say that I think that some of them were not, just based on what I'm seeing as an observer, watching it on television and having the benefit of watching it on replay several times. I think some of them were bad. The one against Tom Wilson comes to mind, for example. The penalty kill came up short. Penalty kill again gave up a goal, making the fourth straight game the team has allowed a power play goal. The PK redeemed itself in the third. The PK took 5 penalties and saw the Caps were up to the task. The Capitals shut down 2 5-on-3 opportunities and drew another penalty on the PK. So both sides of the coin, positive, negative, positive, negative. I'm going to say, if I'm going to rate it by ratio, that it was more negative than positive in this last game. But Carberry to media in Montreal, we did take some penalty steps, big picture-wise, especially in the third. We're really struggling to finish and score right now. So for us to fight back and kill a ton of penalties, I liked the character to battle back and get that game to OT. Again, it's a point. They made it to OT, so it was a point. Ultimately, Spencer Carberry would like to have more wins than losses and not have it come down to the wire, and then lose in overtime, of course. But, I mean, this is his job, and it's his job to fix, what ails this team. The power play, the penalty kill, it all has to work, in great harmony. Otherwise, this team is not going to succeed. The power play failed to convert on any of their multiple chances, though the looks were there. Nicholas Backstrom had 2 shots on the man advantage as well. So Nick Backstrom had a good game as well. It's important to highlight the positivity as well as the negativity, because sometimes I think in a loss, it's easy to overlook the positivity. It's just easier to latch on to negativity. And I see that all over social media, that they lost, they suck, they suck, they suck. They don't talk about, Strome and Ovechkin and Backstrom having all these shots on goal. Again, I understand where that emanates from. I understand that it's not a winning product, at the end of the day, but still, it's important to take a look at what works as well as what doesn't work, because I think that the negative road is the easy one to follow. But for me, like I said, towards the end of the game, they were making steps in the right direction. They failed to convert on 5 power play opportunities. The Capitals have yet to score a power play goal this season and are now 0 for 13 on the year. That is something to address. That is something that needs to change if this team is going to have success. I've heard people saying it's Kemper's fault. And I'm like, are you kidding me? If it wasn't for Kemper, the Capitals would be in far worse condition. Kemper is, the one that's saving the Capitals bacon by at least keeping them in the game, right? So all things to work on. But I think that, the power play and the penalty kill, those are big pieces with what's not working with the Caps. They've got to find a way to address this if they want to have maintained success through the duration of this season. They're starting in the hole. Make no mistake about it. And I'm not going to candy coat and say that they're playing well. They are not playing well. They got themselves in this hole. They're going to have to get themselves out of this hole. The one thing that I know for sure, is that if Peter Laviolette was still the head coach, everyone would be blaming Peter Laviolette right now. They should have changed the coach and they would be playing better. Well, guess what? They did. Spencer Carberry and the assistants changed. Still not getting the results. Blaine Forsythe is the problem. Guess what? He's not here. Still not getting it done. The onus has to fall on the players for executing Spencer Carberry's plans, how he draws up the plans, what their systems are, and his assistants as well. So it's easy to say, and I know that I would hear that right now if it was still Laviolette. They should have fired that guy. Make it clear here. It has to go on the players as well as the coach. But one thing I know for sure is Spencer Carberry is the guy up for it. I really do believe that he is up for the task at hand. It's just, I think, implementing it and having those players play to those systems because it takes a while. And I know that they had the preseason. I know they had preseason games, but sometimes it still takes a little bit longer than that. What we are ultimately hoping for is a big win against the Maple Leafs. And I think that, that positive momentum will lead to more wins. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. All right. I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen and view this on YouTube every day. You are what makes this podcast successful, and I have you to thank. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. And are you a fan of other DC sports? Well, Locked On has got you covered. We have Locked On Commanders, Nationals, and Wizards. So no matter what major DC sport it is, Locked On has got you covered. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, and I'll talk to you again next time.